Hello, hello. This is Christina Barton. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about something crazy that Kathy Hochul said about there's black people in the Bronx who don't even know what computers are, and to be fair, I think it's probably true. I don't think little teeny tiny babies might know what computers are, but it's so weird how these people continuously keep infantilizing black people. Joe Biden does it often, or maybe often is not accurate. He's done it enough. Enough that it's concerning. So we're gonna talk about that, react to that, and I also want to look at this culture war debate with Tim Pool and Kristen Hawkins, who's the president of Students for Life, and this pro-choice pastor who did not want to talk about theology at all, but he wasn't good with philosophy and he wasn't good with science. Like everything just circled back to, well, if the woman wants to do it, then they should just we should just allow her to do it. So it was very frustrating. I'm basically just got to the end of it right before I went live. And it was a very frustrating 2 hours for me, just to be frank. But I saw a clip on the internet that an abolitionist posted, and after seeing the clip that went around and how they phrased it, I don't think it was kind of an a fair representation of what was happening. So I'm glad I didn't just take that snippet and then react to that snippet, because I feel like the wording was really a reach, and I couldn't. I thought I had saved it on Twitter when I saw it, but I did not. So, but anyway, we're gonna actually react to some moments in this thing, but there was like me moments where I was like yelling out loud in frustration in my house in the car as I was listening to it. So I'm gonna share some of my anguish with you guys. I hope that's okay. So anyway, before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blackteennews.com, show different content on my website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider legal donation at blackteennews.com/donate. It does cost a streamer on my website, all that stuff, so you guys can support. I do very much appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can do super chats. If you're watching back later, you guys can do super thanks. You guys can also support by going to the website, checking out different merch that we have at the store, like this black tea mug. We got some pro-life merch. We got this "You Are Not That Special" tea that I got there. I also have a mug as well. So if there's somebody you just need to humble a little bit, go ahead and get some of that. You guys could I guess you guys could get that stuff and pass it out at these protests with these college campuses, but I don't plan to talk about that stuff today. We're gonna take a break. um it's funny that the stuff was just like dominating the news cycle, because I know I've been talking about it, but I'm kind of like bored with it already myself. I'm just like, it's so crazy, and just tell these kids to shut up and go home. But there is one thing though that I saw about the Free Press. Barry Weiss's paper did an article about the janitor who was like held captive at Columbia, and I only read like a snippet so far of it that was going around. I'm like, I have to read this whole article. I may have to read the whole thing with you guys, but um he like one person who's holding him captive was like a rich 40-year-old person, and he's like this poor janitor just trying to do his job, and they just took over the building. And I don't know if that person had a real job or just has cash on hand and is too bored and can make themselves feel virtuous by, I don't know, taking on these causes and whatnot, but we are in an age where, I don't know, maybe things are too readily available, and people are searching for battles and meeting in different fights that are just silly. That are just silly. Um, you know, um anyway. Anyway, let's hop to it. So I want to go as I was looking through these different posts about Kathy Hochul, someone reposted this video of this TikTok with Joe Biden. So I'm going to start off with that. You guys know that I prefer to start with something funny if I find something funny to share. And so some time ago Joe Biden was talking about black people of color and the internet. And so someone, this is like one of the earliest TikToks that I really saw go viral. I'm not saying it's one of the first ones, but like when I was really becoming associated with TikTok, this video was going around, and of this man making fun of Joe Biden, who said some things that were pretty insensitive toward black people.
A lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, the Hispanic and the African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccine. A lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody.
So yeah, great TikTok there. So Kathy Hochul was talking about some new technology that they were having to be made ready and available, and there was a minute clip going around, but I can only find these 19-second snippets, which Brennan Jones posted a 23-second one, so maybe we'll watch that one. I don't know which one. I know I saved this small one and I watched another one later that was longer, but she thinks that young black people in the Bronx don't know what computers are.
To follow, because right now we have, young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word a computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things. And I want the world open up to all of them, because when you have their diverse voices innovating solutions through technology, then you're really addressing society's broader challenges.
So that's basically the outrage of her thinking that in the Bronx, we're not talking about some super remote village somewhere in some foreign country where no outside man has graced their presence. We're talking about the Bronx in the United States of America. And she thinks that there's black people who don't even know what the word computer is. Now again, there are people who maybe don't know that word. My nephew, he's 2, and his vocabulary is limited. However, he probably maybe can't say. He probably could say if you press him. He probably won't. Right? He's kind of picky what he tries to say. So, if I was talking about a computer, I don't know if he would just kind of know that word. He kind of would know what it is, though. And more importantly, he knows how to get on your phone and go on YouTube and go through the reels and listen to his favorite song, which is a Ty Tribbett song. He's a gospel artist, and he has a song. It's like new, everything new. And I'm not a fan of it. It's kind of like too much of that, I don't know, new style. I don't know. It's not my thing. I've heard it a lot. It's not a song that I think is so terrible that I'm like, oh my gosh, it's again, but he just gets up and he just bounces, and he says new, and he says new, and she and different stuff that the artist does. And I even like started trying to teach him his colors. I'm like, blue, 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 your shirt is blue, 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 your eyes are blue, blue, you know. Um, but these kids know how to get on phones, and they know how to skip ads on YouTube and click on different things. And and they know to go up to you if you start singing the song. I had started singing it a little bit, and my brother was like, do not sing that song unless you're about to hand him your phone, because I'm not handing him my phone, because he was the one playing with them. He's like, don't sing that song unless you're going to give him your phone. So they are very well versed in technology. Um, where does this belief come that there's so many people who are left behind? You can say that there's lots of people who don't have particular access to stuff because of finances, and that extends beyond race. That extends beyond race. If you think there's poor Black kids out there who don't have technology and maybe don't know what a computer is, I don't know how you don't they go to school where their computers and everything? You know, if she said there's people who don't have access to internet or something, that's a fact. That there's some people out in this world who don't have access to internet, or who live in really bad areas, and the lines and stuff aren't out there, or there's maybe one provider, etc. Or finances could be so bad maybe you don't really have internet, you know. So that's a thing. But to keep persisting like there's this big gap in knowledge, and you make it racial, it's really gross. And so there's people laughing and blasting her, but it's something that I don't want to say is just common to Democrats to throw everybody under the bus, but there's a couple that do this. Joe Biden is one for sure, but Kathy Hochul, it's really hilarious. It's really hilarious, and I don't know how in 2024 you can make a statement like that, period, but you can make such a big political mistake like that is so offensive to people. When you govern a state that has such tremendous diversity. Again, you're talking about the Bronx. It's not some remote village somewhere. It's just the Bronx. So what is your opinion, Miss Lady who gets to stay in the governor's mansion, of people in the Bronx? How do what sort of like class warfare elitist attitude do you possess that you think the Bronx is so far removed and so foreign, especially if you're a person of color, that you're a Black person, that they wouldn't even know what the word computer is? Like, if you're a little child or something, that extends beyond race. Maybe you don't know what a computer is, but many of these kids, yeah, it's amazing how quick, which your phone is a computer basically, um it amazed me how quick the kids learn to like skip YouTube ads, and then they watch the craziest things. They would watch just like random YouTube stuff, and it was like, here's an egg. Oh my gosh. A Captain America figurine was just birthed out of this red egg. And then they just do random stuff, and they just be so engrossed. And I didn't understand that. Why they're so like addicted to that. Like when the girls got a little older, my nieces, at least they're watching like storylines of like, there's one person, they just have a huge YouTube channel, and they have like the Disney daughters. They have like little girls, and they pretend like they are the daughter. I guess they're little baby doll versions of different Disney princesses. And it's like Anya and Elsia, who are the daughters of Anna and Elsa and their adventures or whatever. So they'll watch stuff like that. But yeah, they know how to work them phones. They'll know how to work the phones. Like, now my nephew's at age when, they can, you really got to kind of watch them. I mean, they know not to buy stuff on the phones without permission or whatever, but to they can toggle to other stuff, and like, oh yeah, we got to watch or limit more stuff. that they're doing, because not that they do anything bad, that but you just want to make sure you're preemptively scouring, so they, in case they ever get that inclination, that you catch them. So so she's a total bigot. Yes, Jerry. Yes, Jerry. Yeah, my sister Katrina said, so dumb. So she doesn't know what TikTok is, and that there's so many kids on there. There's definitely kids. There's definitely a lot of kids on TikTok and other places. There's so much. First, think about the fact that we had to do remote learning. Not me, but kids had to do remote learning just a couple years ago. We don't think that they know what computers are. Did they not have remote learning at schools in the Bronx? Did they make I'm pretty sure in New York they didn't just make those kids go to school, because as they said, they don't have computers. They probably made some kind of way. Most people have computers. Do you know how many like $200 computers I sold at Micro Center when I worked there? I'd be like, "You want something better?" And they'd be like, "Give me that $199 computer." And I'm like, "There's this other one that's just like, if you spent like $50 more, or like maybe 75, this one's a good deal. It's a lot better. Like, give me that $199." I'm like, okay. It's just absurd. Or you can get a Google, like a Chromebook that can do a lot, or people get those refurbs, you know. Internet I can understand, but you still shouldn't make those assumptions. Again, it's like location or economic status or something, but just to keep throwing out that Black people don't know how to get lawyers, don't know how to use the internet, don't know what a computer is. Just stop it. We're very savvy people. Very savvy. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about this for now. I saw something going around about her apologizing, but I'm assuming she would apologize for that, so I guess there's no reason to assume that it's not true, but how silly. How absolutely silly. So anyway, let's move on, because I'm sure we'll be talking about this for a while. And so I saw a snippet the other day of Kristen Hawkins on Timcast. He has this cultural war show, and they were talking about, in the snippet, and it was just like a minute snippet, and Tim was saying something about how pro-life, he's had a lot of pro-life people on the show, and when they're pressed about this particular thing, they don't see abortion in the same light as really like murder outside of the womb. And the clip ended before Kristen could really talk, so I didn't know what her response was to Tim. And now that I've seen the whole thing, I don't really think the way that they were phrasing it really kind of translates well into the critique they thought that they were making. So again, I'm very glad that I didn't just go off that snippet and make I don't know, 30-minute rant about it. I'm like, I want to know what she's going to say. So I'm really glad that I did that. But anyway, it sparked my curiosity about this entire debate. So I watched it today. And I didn't know that someone else was on the show with Kirsten. And it's this pro-choice pastor, or he calls himself a pastor. I probably let's just say I wouldn't have respect for his office, but Pastor Ryan Phipps, and he was so frustrating the entire time, and he just would not really answer things directly. And if she wanted to talk about, he's like, I don't want to talk about theology, and they'd say, okay, we can talk about the science, and then he wasn't really into the science, and he didn't seem to be too much into the philosophical. Just had nothing really to add. And the only thing he would really say continuously is that if the mother wants to have an abortion, she should be able to have the abortion. And any like up until like any time, I suppose, though he would, that's what you could gather, but he wasn't like a straight shooter with his commentary. And it was very, very frustrating. And the most point blank thing that he answered, I will show you guys. Um, and it's pretty horrific. And I like hollered out loud in just dismay. um, so that'll be the last thing I show you. But he's for abortion, but he keeps saying that he doesn't think the government should be, forcing women, and he thinks that unless like the government shouldn't be making you do things unless it's like unless you're like obstructing someone else's rights, freedom, or a life, or etc. And Kristen's just like, okay, that's a whole abortion debate though, because you are killing someone. And then there were times when he tried to, say, well, it's not really a human, and they're like, no, it's a human. And they didn't even really nail down personhood. He was just so kind of slimy, not even like slimy clever, just frustrating. So anyway, that's a little background on it. You guys can feel free to watch this whole thing. I don't really expect you to. I don't highly recommend it totally, because it was extraordinarily frustrating. So I wanted to show a couple of parts from it. And go from there. Okay. One second.
That the mother should choose that in a medical context by asking a medical professional, everything as we do with any other.
So are you saying that the woman could be pregnant and say, this is a life deserving of protected rights under the Constitution, or no? And that the point at which the baby is either, let's say there's a woman driving in her car and a drunk driver slams into her. Mm-hmm. She's 7 months pregnant. The baby dies. She then says, I choose that this baby was murdered by him. Mm-hmm. Then they charge him.
Should he be charged with 2 murders or 1?
Pastor? Well, my question is, I'm trying to understand at what point do we charge someone with murder for the termination of this life? Is it murder only if the baby is born?
Charge the mother or the guy
the drunk driver. Right. So let's, this is my question, right? You said early on in the show that the baby is attached to the mother, has no agency or less agency, mm-hmm. and it's dependent upon the mother, so it's the mother's choice. My question is just at what point does the law kick in? Where, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I understand. And I think you have 2 people that want 2 different things, right? Mm-hmm. 2 people with different beliefs about the same thing, and those beliefs cause them to formulate different opinions and make different choices about their life. You have the federal government that has to make laws that will protect
persons.
Both of these, all of the persons involved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it seems to me that the most logical way to legislate such a thing is to let people make that choice on their own, provided that their choice doesn't cause injury to them or others.
But my question,
the child is the other. You keep saying others, but you're refusing to acknowledge the child is an other. They're making a choice that may cause injury to themselves and will certainly cause injury to another human being, the child in the womb.
Right. By that logic, though, it means that in the future, we will start. Would a baby that is born in a test tube in a lab environment outside
of artificial womb,
outside of the body of the mother, is that considered life to you?
Absolutely.
But
I think that's going to be wrong when the artificial wombs come. I think it actually will end the entire argument for abortion. The whole my body, my choice won't be an argument anymore. You know, the last article I read says like artificial wombs they might have the first child in artificial womb by 2026. But that will take away the whole my body, my choice.
That would
okay,
be
so
That's still a
we,
human
we
being.
still have a huge problem.
Yes,
and that
we do.
is you haven't answered at what
Yeah,
point
yeah.
does the law protect life?
By the way, there's already people trying to take the artificial womb argument and say that we need to solidify abortion rights like immediately before they start making these artificial wombs, because people will use the artificial womb argument to say that, okay, well, you don't need to gestate the baby, you can transfer the baby, and they still want to have the right to abort the baby even though you can gestate it somewhere else. So I think Kristen is kind of jumping the I don't know, the line here, jumping to conclusions, assuming that it would end the abortion debate. Because the abortion advocates will still argue that you need to still be able to do that. So the justification will probably, that blanket justification might be stripped away a bit, but they're still going to argue whatever they want to argue, because at the end of the day, they want to be able to have the abortions. They just do.
I think that the mom and the doctor have to make that choice. And then on a grander scale, the country has to come to some sort of a consensus about where that line is.
You're saying you personally, and I'm just genuine, honest question. You personally don't have a view of at what point a police officer would say, I'm arresting you for murder.
Yeah.
Like
the Lacey Connor Pearson law. Bring up that.
If a baby's in a basket and someone walks up and kills it, it's a murder.
Yes.
If the baby is same amount of gestation time, 8.5 months. So there's two women. They're identical twins who get pregnant identically, and the babies gestate for 8.5 months. One woman says, or one woman goes to the hospital with they both go to the hospital at the same time. The doctor says, we're going to induce labor. The baby needs to come out. She gives birth. They cut the umbilical cord. The other baby is still within the womb of the woman, but they are both identically developed. It would be murder for the baby that was prematurely birthed, but it would not be murder for the baby that is still within the womb. This is my question.
And you're asking which one of those I would affirm?
Well, so I'm trying to understand your view of at what point does the law say a murder has been committed?
Most people have no clue that in 20.
Sorry. Yeah. So he's gonna keep. You're not gonna get straight answers from him, really. But
your argument is a woman and a doctor can choose to terminate the life of the baby, because the baby is within the mother. My question is then, if the baby is identical in every way but prematurely birthed, is it now protected under the law?
So the baby is exiting the womb, correct?
Two babies.
There's two babies. One is out of the womb and one's in the womb.
Right. So it is entirely possible, and probably happens every day, that a baby at 8.5 months is induced. The doctor says, look, we think we have to induce premature labor, but the baby can survive on its own. It'll be okay. And the baby is birthed, cut the umbilical cord. It's a healthy, happy baby.
What does the mother want?
I'm not talking about what the mother wants. I'm saying,
saying that's the issue. Like, that's where we have to get to. Is it the mother participated in behavior that created this process that will end up becoming a human being?
Right. But my question is not anything related to the mother.
Okay.
So the baby is born at 8.5 months gestation, and then a guy runs in and bashes it, killing it.
Sure.
Do we charge that man with murder?
I think that we would, yes.
Okay, so a woman in an identical circumstance is about to give birth through a premature inducement of labor, and a guy runs in and bashes her stomach, killing the baby. Woman's fine, injured, baby's dead. Is that a murder?
Did the woman intend to have the baby?
We don't know.
Well, we have to know that.
That's interesting.
But how does the law handle a separate third party's view in this regard? We don't, when we're dealing with murder in a criminal court case, we don't ask whether other third parties intended for someone to die or live. We say this person person A ended life of person B. So the question is, at what point does the court and the law say this was a murder? But I think you've actually made it clear that if the mother is in the hospital and says, I don't want the baby, and a strange man runs in and bashes her stomach with a hammer and kills it, there's no murder committed.
Well, that's actually not true. So in California, they have the Lacey and Connor Peterson law, right? So if she's on her way to the abortion facility, say she's standing outside of the abortion facility in San Francisco, and she's going to have that abortion at 8.5 months, Tim. If she's murdered, someone comes up and puts a gun to her head and shoots her. She and the child die in front of the abortion facility. Whoever shot her, whether it's her husband or just a random stranger, will be tried in California with 2 homicides.
In California?
Yes, because
Wow,
do you remember the Lacey and Connor Peterson case in California? It was the mother. She was in the 3rd trimester. She disappeared. Do you remember that case, Ryan? It was national news in the late 90s. Scott Pearson. It was like, where did Lacey Pearson go? And then it finally ended up, it was the husband.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is how our laws don't make sense. In liberal California that permits abortion uses taxpayer funds to fund abortions. They say it's your right to choose to end the life of a human being. But if she's standing outside of the abortion facility, she's shot dead, and she and the child die, that murderer will be charged with 2 murders. But if she walks in the doors of the Planned Parenthood or the abortion facility, lays on the table, it's considered a choice. Even though she has already decided in her mind that she's going to kill it, the baby, the fetus, the clump of cells, whatever you're calling it, even though she's already deemed that she doesn't want this child and wants to end his or her life. That's an interesting question, right?
I got in a lot of trouble with the pro-choice crowd.
So so that was one segment that was amazing to me. And again, this guy calls himself a pro-choice pastor. He says he's a pastor, but he happens to be pro-choice. This idea that the scenario that Tim laid out about if there were 2 identical women, let's say they married identical twins, they're both pregnant, they got pregnant at the same time, her one baby, is delivered early at 8.5 months, and the other woman has her baby same time, someone assaults her, kills her baby, was that murder? And his answer is, did she want that baby? So your rights should not be determined whether someone wants you or not. That's not how we dictate our inalienable rights. That's not how we should apply them. They talked a lot about rights and other stuff like that. And I think at one point he tried to talk about slavery it's like some kind of gotcha or whatever. And they were both more informed about the subject than he was. And I'm just thinking, like, how can you not realize throughout this conversation, which Tim flat out said, I don't see how your position on abortion is morally different than the argument for slavery. Because if it's a human and you're just deciding not to recognize the personhood of them, and you're just going to say, well, it's my choice, it's a woman's choice to commit this action, and it's it's someone's choice to own property, even though that's a human, and just going to ignore their rights or whatever. He doesn't see how he's like, they're different things, sure, but ethically, how are you very different? So, which, he didn't really have an answer for it. He really didn't have much answers for this stuff, but you don't get to just decide whether we're going to prosecute people based on if they were wanted or not. What if someone else murdered your child outside of the womb, and then the parents were like, you know what, we were meaning to kick that little punk out the house, so it's totally cool, we don't have to prosecute the murderer, we'll let that one slide. That's not how our society goes. But everything had to be deferred to does the mother want it? And I don't understand this super simpy sort of attitude about life, which he continuously deferred to, like, what does a woman want the whole time? How does a woman feel? How does a woman feel? And that's all. And like they talked about abortion in this case scenario, he talked about 8.5 months. So late term, early, whatever. They didn't even talk about early abortions that much in this conversation. But as long as the woman was cool with it, you know, her intentions, which is interesting, because let me bring up the fact that there was Kermit Gosnell. He was an abortionist who did late term abortions. Now he did them later than what there's legally permitted in his state, but people would come to him with cash, I guess, and he would do the abortions really late. But he wouldn't do multiple day procedures. If you do an abortion, you know, a late, if you're in like the 20th week or whatever, they start becoming like 2-day procedures, or you might have a 4-day procedure. If it gets really, really late. And so he wouldn't do that. And there were things wrong with his clinic outside of just him being an abortionist. But they were filthy. There's like so filthy that women would go there who didn't have STDs and like leave with them. Like it was really disgusting. So it was a house of horrors. There's a movie called Gosnell. Dean Cain was in it some years ago. It's worth watching. So you guys can go ahead and check that film out. But if you go to the website, you can see some of the picture of baby boy A that was aborted, who was somewhere in his 30th week when Gosnell aborted him. And the nurse took a picture of the baby because it just kind of struck her how big he was. And Gosnell was making comments like, oh, he's nearly big enough to walk me to the bus stop. So he would do things like keep parts in jars like everywhere. Like he had remains in his house. And when the police were like raiding his house, he just got on the piano and started playing. And they're just like, what the heck? And Dean Cain, he said when they were like putting stuff together for the set, and there was like the baby, I'm saying like a lot, I'm sorry, jars in baby parts in the jars. He said, you guys are laying it a little thick, aren't you? And so they showed him the evidence of Gosnell actually doing those sorts of things, because he thought it was an exaggeration because it was so awful. But anyway, he would induce the labor and then snip the spines of the babies. That's how he would abort. So instead of giving women a pill so it suffocates and starves their children, or sucking them up through a tube smaller than what they are so they'd come out. If you can think about the scene in Aliens Resurrection, how they killed that alien queen, not the alien queen, the alien grandchild technically. And they shot a hole through in the glass, and it created it that was right out to space. And the alien was trapped on the glass hole, and it just started sucking the alien out into the vacuum of space. It's a really gross thing that happened in the film, but that's how they defeated the monster. And that's essentially what the abortions are, when they suck them up, the babies up. And then the other ones are, you rip them apart piece by piece, and then when it's super late, you induce fetal demise and deliver the rest of the baby in like pieces and stuff. So anyway, Kermit Gosnell, he wouldn't wait for all that. He would just induce the labor so they would start to give birth. And then when the babies were out, so they were born alive, and then he would snip their spines. And I'm not saying all the babies that he induced that they were viable and could live on their own, but he would deliver them. And that's just how he told his staff to do that. And his staff wasn't really medically trained enough to be doing their jobs, but that's how he just instructed them to operate, that you induce the labors and then you snip the baby spines, and that would kill the babies. So if all that matters is the woman's intention, these women obviously came to Gosnell to not just be not pregnant, but to have an abort, to make sure that, I guess, they weren't burdened with their DNA being out there somewhere. So he induced the labors, babies were out, and then he killed them. So if it only matters what the mother's intention was, why is that man in jail? I think he should be in jail. I think he should be in jail. And he wouldn't have been able to do all the stuff that he did for so long if the government didn't basically turn a blind eye to shady stuff going on in his clinic. But because he wasn't really regulated like how he should have been regulated. But if all that matters is that the woman went in to get an abortion, to have her pregnancy end with the death of a baby, that's what he honored. That's what he did. So how, just because he took the fast track as opposed to like Warren Hearn doing it through a couple days, like Warren Hearn will induce fetal demise if you go in for like a third trimester abortion. They'll induce a fetal demise on day 1, and then they have to prepare the body for the rest of the days or whatever, and then they start removing the deceased child. Is what Gosnell did. All the other conditions of his clinic and stuff aside, but just look at the fact that people went in to have a baby killed and he did that. Is it that much different than what Warren Hearn does, who will do a late term abortion for any reason, at least up into 32 weeks? I mean, he will probably do it later, but any reason up to like 32 weeks. Because he just feels like, well, it's in the mother's body, so all even if it's like a sex selective abortion, they all involve her health, so I'm going to honor what the woman wants. How are they that different? How are they that different? And why does this logic only extend to the in the womb, the baby in the womb, with the magical vajayjay before they pass through? Because it's not about gestation for this guy. So it's remarkable. Like Tim Pool, he'll ask different pro-choice people if the baby can live after it's viable. Why kill the baby? Why actually induce the labor? Why not just induce the labor? Why kill the baby? And people don't, I've seen him ask this question. People don't have good answers. It's just, that's what the woman wants. Or they don't believe that women would do that, which isn't true. But they don't have good answers. They'll just keep, it's because it's a woman's choice. So we have to acknowledge that abortion is about killing babies. It's not just about not being pregnant. Because we do seem to especially view it differently as a society, including people who are pro-abortion, pro-choice or whatever, that there's something uniquely different about the baby being in the mother. And as long as it's in the mother, they feel like she has free reign to end them. But even if it was the same gestational age, maybe preborn or whatever, as long as it's outside, you shouldn't touch them. Or if they're outside, even if they delivered them for the purpose of killing them, that will still land you in jail. So we have very inconsistent ideas and laws about all this. Very inconsistent ideas.
Already decided in her.
Sorry, I just refreshed the page. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I don't think I necessarily want to listen to some more of his arguments. I know I had
abortion and the religious.
Does the Constitution speak to abortion specifically?
It sort of does. The 14th Amendment.
It sort of does.
No, see,
right. So, and this is a question that has to be answered by SCOTUS, but I'll read it for you.
Yep.
It says, "No state shall make or enforce."
That was an interesting part of the conversation when they talked about the 14th Amendment, and I guess I saved this because of Tim said some interesting things that I want to address real quick.
Any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due. Can I finish?
Yeah.
Without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law, which would mean the Supreme Court has to answer the question: are unborn persons?
That's right. So you notice in 14th Amendment, it starts out by saying citizens, but then intentionally changes it from citizens to persons.
This is important too, because illegal immigrants are protected under the Bill of Rights. Now, a lot of people are upset over the Second Amendment on this one, the argument being they've broken the law, and thus there's a due process restriction on the right to keep and bear arms if you are illegally entering the country. But we do know that people who are not citizens of this country, tourists, good example, they are allowed free speech, they are given the right to a speedy trial, and all of those things. This is why the distinction is important, that a state cannot deprive any person outside of citizens of life, liberty, or property.
That's right.
Scientifically, secularly, and under the Constitution, I personally am demanding we get an answer from the Supreme Court as to whether the unborn are persons.
Right.
It's not been adjudicated. When Roe got overturned initially, I was along with many people saying maybe it is better that we take a federalist approach to this because of the conflict and let states decide. However, upon reading the 14th Amendment and then having several debates over this, particularly with my friend Seamus, I said, no, I disagree now. I think the Supreme Court has to answer this. This is not a question for Congress. The Supreme Court very well could come out and say they're not persons. They very well could come out and say they are persons. But this is not a religious issue. This is a question of when are people granted their rights? And so there is a similar, albeit very different, argument pertaining to slavery, in that the argument made at the time, there were abolitionists, there were people who were pro-slavery. Most people were neutral and said, I don't care, leave me alone. But the issue was the argument of personhood. This is before the 14th Amendment, mind you. When is someone a person granted rights under the Constitution? And of course, the slave owner said they have no rights. They're slaves. They're not protected. The 14th Amendment is written specifically following 13th and 14th, following the end of the Civil War. And now we have the question of are the unborn persons? Roe v. Wade was interesting in that there was an attempt to answer this. It actually came up as, at a certain point in a pregnancy, a baby is inviable. It can't survive outside of the mother. And so this being completely dependent upon the mother's body, there's a question of whether or not we can say yes or no to abortion. However, there is a point that was made about when the baby becomes viable and capable of living on its own. So then where that brings me to when does
a baby become able to live? By living on its own, I'm assuming we're meaning
they get onto the weeds, I think, a little bit here at that point with him and his silly interjections. But I thought it was interesting that Tim changed his mind on that, because a lot of people are still insisting like, oh, federalist position, the state should decide, etc. And I'm just like, no, we should. The 14th Amendment, why would it equal protection and the right to life, etc., not apply to everyone? And you shouldn't be able to deprive anyone of those liberties unless you have some kind of due process. Now, they do go on to talk about how if they have the 14th Amendment is a law of the land for fetuses and you can't have an abortion. Well, you could maybe technically have one, but you'd have to have some kind of due process for the fetus before you could do something like that. And so Tim suggested that it would become a hassle to be able to get an abortion in order to save the woman's life, because you'd have to go through a court process with a judge or something before you could go ahead and have the abortion. Because Kristen's like, no, you'd have like the medical board or whoever would make that determination. And he's like, no, that's not due process. You need some kind of judge to weigh in. And so I thought that was an interesting tidbit of information, which, they'd have to just make sure that they, suss that out in the legislation moving forward. But I thought that kind of wasn't accurate though, because they talked about self-defense. Those are circumstances where you can take someone's life in order to defend your own. But in that particular case, though, you're not going before a judge in that heat of the moment to say, I think my life is in danger, I'm going to shoot this person. You don't do that. Now, after the fact, there will be some kind of investigation to assess whether it really was self-defense, and you may be arrested, you may not be arrested. So they might easily be able to go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, totally, the evidence bears that out, that you were 100% your life is in danger. But if it's a little less clear, then you might have to have a big trial, hopefully not a big show trial in the way that kid gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Kyle Rittenhouse. I was going to say Kevin. Kyle Rittenhouse. Hopefully it's not a big thing like that. I thought it was pretty obvious that he had a self-defense argument from jump. Thank God there's so many people filming stuff all over the place. So in the case of a woman needing an abortion to save her life, then I would assume the doctors would act as they are supposed to act, and then they would do some kind of, evaluation quickly to affirm that was the correct thing to do. Because when there is some kind of life that dies, don't doctors usually, I don't know how often they do it, I maybe watch too many doctor shows, but they assess, like, did they do everything correctly, etc., blah blah blah. And if there's no kind of issue where they have to where there was some kind of like negligence or something, they'd be like, oh yeah, that was the right call, and no one would be prosecuted, certainly not the mother and certainly not the doctor in that case. So I don't think that in order to save the life of the mother, if we had to give everyone due process before killing them, that you'd have to go before a judge before that happened. In the Supreme Court case with Texas, with the whole Kate Cox story, she by the way, I've said this many times, that her doctors did not make the argument that she needed the abortion to save her life, or that her life was in imminent danger, nor did her doctors argue for the standard that was necessary to get the exception. But the courts made it clear that you do not have to go before the courts every time you need an abortion to save the mother's life. You should be able, if you have that kind of emergency, then you should of course do the abortion to you are permitted to do that in that circumstance. But in that particular circumstance, the doctor who didn't get, because you're supposed to get a second opinion, and the AG pointed out when they tried to shut them down from having the abortion, was like, you didn't even go through all the measures, you're supposed to be able to do this. But they wanted some kind of okay in before they did the procedure, because they didn't want it to come back on them later, when they should have, if the patient was in some kind of imminent danger, or they need to really save her life, that they needed to act immediately, or could have just acted and and then went from there. But they wanted the special protection before they had the unnecessary abortion that they weren't actually allowed to do. So no, I think you would just persist in in the way that you usually would to treat to save the patient's life. But pro-life OBGYNs would argue that you don't have abortions to save a woman's life. You may induce a labor, because if you're in some kind of position where it's a dangerous pregnancy, then you're not going to have multiple day procedures or something like that. You're going to want them out as fast as possible. And the fastest way, you don't have 2 days or 3 days or 4 days to prepare your cervix to take the baby out. You would want to induce the labor, and it might be that the child just physically cannot survive at that point, and they do die as a result of that. But that's not the intention of that child. The intention isn't to kill that child. The intention is to preserve as much life as possible and to preserve the life of that mother. And it's a triage situation. It's really not the same, and it's not certainly not the same procedures, and it's not the same ethically. So I don't think there'd be a problem there. I'd be interested to talk to Tim about this, certainly. But I thought there was interesting points raised and things that people need to think about and have good constructive conversations. I'm going to jump ahead because to the section where you started to talk to Kristen about her views a bit. So this was kind of the clip that was going around that I was talking about.
Could be crazy or whatever. I don't see a legal obligation for me to provide
Only
food.
go back a little bit.
You would take every precaution to preserve that human life. You would call EMS, you would call 911 as long as we still have 911.
Threat of massive injury, like it leaves you permanently paralyzed and like the baby can't survive or whatever. The problem now is abortion is just, oops. I don't see that.
So you and I don't agree on the issue of abortion cases, right? But I don't think the circumstances of your conception changes your value. And I have too many friends who were conceived and raped to be able to say, yeah, I think they should have been killed because their father is an evil bastard. So
but that's not what I'm saying either.
But I'm saying,
sorry, I jumped too far ahead. I did want to talk about that, but maybe I'll have to table some of this for another day. But that wasn't the section. This is the section I wanted to jump to right now. Sorry.
Young kids, this whole generation's mind abortion. They're going to get to college. Like my kids are going to get to college, be in a cafeteria or dorm room, having a discussion with somebody from California. And hopefully my children are aghast to learn that their roommate or their friend comes from a state where it's legal to kill children. That is why the pro-choice side was upset about Roe versus Wade. Wasn't that because Roe versus Wade was gone, because abortions are still happening. It's that this is the law, and the law not being there is going to change people's minds because many people derive their morality from legality, but they shouldn't.
I have some questions for you. Do you believe abortion is murder?
I believe it is killing. The question is murder is, but yes, it's the question is in the intention of the mother, right?
You've referred to it as murder more times than killing in this very discussion.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can say it's murder because I know what you're killing a human being.
Do you personally believe it's murder?
Yeah, I think it's wrong.
So the intentional killing of a...
So I don't know why she danced around right there with the murder line, and because I believe that she probably thinks it is murder, and she said, yeah, it's wrong. But I know a lot of pro-lifers have probably just surrendered the it's murder line because they don't want to go into a big back and forth while they're debating with people. Like, no, it's legal, so it's not murder. So, I get that if that's the reason why she just kind of shied away from using that terminology. Now, it's an unjust killing. So yeah, I would say that it is murder, but is it technically legal in some states? Yeah, in some states it's not. So I think it's fine to call it murder, but if you do that, you might be debating someone where it would get into the weeds unnecessarily. So a lot of pro-life people will just police their language to cut out in some of the drama that they'll engage in. Like they might not use the term baby because they don't want to argue with people for 10 minutes about the term baby or the term, a child or kid or so on. So, they might just be like, whatever. I think there's probably more people who are on the pro-life side who have the opinion that they're not really for that abortions in the case of life of the mother, like that really doesn't happen, but they just kind of concede the point because one, it doesn't really happen that often anyway, and if in that event that's probably a triage situation, so on. But in their minds, you don't actually abort the baby, you just would induce the labor, or and they may not survive, but the intention is different, the processes would be different, etc. So but they'll just say, yeah, I give the exception, to not get lost in the weeds with folks. So maybe that's why she dodged calling it murder. I don't know, but let's keep going.
another human is the legal definition.
Mhm.
Do you believe that people have a right to use lethal force in the defense of themselves or others?
Like if someone's like invading your home.
If someone points a gun at you and says they intend to kill you, do you have a right to use any force up to and including lethal to defend yourself?
Yes, but I think you'd be very careful with that because
Well,
I mean,
sure.
I would say, if
But-
someone invade your home, shoot them in the leg,
so
don't shoot them in the
there's
head.
complicated degrees.
Well, no, it's
of
because it's a
course.
human being.
So
You
I
should
have
treat
questions that-
respect for human
Right.
beings.
So
With
if
a
someone
gun
is
pointed at you.
threatening your life, you have a right to defend yourself. Simple. If you came upon a person who was threatening to kill another person, do you believe you have a right to use lethal force to stop that murder from occurring?
No,
That's actually still self-defense law. In self-defense law, defense of
I don't think I
others-
could pull that trigger.
But you don't think people have a right to do that, to save someone else's life?
I think it would depend, right, of what sort of situation we're talking
Right, like,
about. If
so-
someone's trying to kill my child,
There are two people. One is intentionally going to kill the other, actively trying to. They're shooting and they're missing.
you can
And
shoot that person
person-
to stop them from
So
shooting your child or your neighbor.
It's not your child. It's literally anyone. The law in most states is very clear. Self-defense is an affirmative defense when killing someone if that person was either going to kill or cause
If
great
the
bodily
outcome
harm.
of it is,
Serious, great bodily harm or death.
Yeah, and I don't understand what was with the dancing around this too. Maybe if she believes whatever she believes, but like if there was a mass shooter and there was a good guy with the gun and they came and they stopped the threat, I would assume everyone would be like, yeah, the person's a hero. So I don't know why the dancing was here, but
Death of you or another. So the question I have, but I think you've basically already answered it. But this question gets into the question of law, which is why I was asking these. You're on a jury, and there's a man who's being charged with murder. And the case is that he was walking down the street and stumbled upon a doctor about to give a woman an abortion, and the woman was at 9 months, and it was clearly definitive, and the doctor was laughing, saying, "I'm now going to kill this baby." The man goes, "No," and then shoots the doctor. He's now charged with murder. Would you, on that jury, acquit the man who shot that doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would definitely, I would say that you wouldn't need to use lethal force in that case. Why would you need to use
That's
lethal
not the question.
force?
Would you acquit a man who was charged with murder? So the answer is no. You would say, go to prison. You shouldn't have shot him.
Yeah, you shouldn't have shot them. No.
So
I mean, some pro-lifers have different opinions on this. I don't believe in the death penalty, right? I'm against capital punishment. The Supreme Court.
The reason
disagrees with me on
why
that.
lethal force, you don't really have a choice when it comes to you have a gun.
You always have a choice. If you stumble upon an abortionist in open air who's getting ready to abort a child at 9 months, I have a choice, and I can choose to shoot the abortionist in the head, or I can choose to shoot the abortionist in the hand or a leg.
No, that's not true at all.
Why wouldn't I have a choice?
You do not have a choice. This is.
I could choose to call the police.
Yeah,
I
you can
could
let them. You can let
choose-
them do it, or you can aim for center mass.
Why am I having to aim to kill in your scenario?
There's no scenario where a person who's armed with a gun can just choose to disarm or disable a person. It's a myth. And this is typically used by anti-gun groups to say that police officer should not have shot center mass. There is no scenario where you can safely aim for a leg or a hand without putting other people
Well, you would
at
have
risk.
to prove intent there, right? You would have to improve what my or whoever's intent was at that point.
For
Were
what?
they shooting to kill? Or were they shooting to
There's
stop?
no such thing as shooting to kill or stop. You shoot someone in the leg, you could hit a femoral artery. You aim for their shoulder or whatever, you could hit their carotid.
the law also
You
doesn't
can-
try to govern
Yeah,
intent.
gotcha.
It's governing what happens after you
No, we
intend
do
something.
No,
intent.
intent
Like, we
is a
have
requirement.
No,
homicide laws and
I'm
manslaughter
saying that-
laws.
Okay, try is
he everything he added was just so silly, but
the wrong word, but the law cannot govern intent. It cannot make me want something or not want something.
No, but
it
intent
can
is a
impose
requirement.
penalties that make me change my views on the thing.
Oh,
But again, that is
you're saying you can't change someone's intent.
you can't change what someone thinks or believes.
So the question
You're
here
a
is,
pastor.
and the
think
reason
you
I
could
asked
think you can
this,
change someone's
typically
ways.
when I talk to pro-lifers, they are unwilling to say
Hmm.
that they view the killing of a baby and the killing of a person as equal.
Hmm.
I hear a whole lot from pro-lifers that abortion is murder.
Hmm.
Then I ask basic questions. There have been a lot of people who have chatted, who have super chatted and said unequivocally If a person was shot a doctor to save the life of a baby, it's self-defense, no question asked. But almost all of the personalities and political commentators who I've asked, they always refuse to say yes. They always deflect and say, for some reason, it is not the same. And I think it was Dennis Prager who pointed this out, who is pro-life, that clearly because of this, is he's what?
He's in most circumstances,
right.
not all.
But he said, I think this was
I had an interesting conversation with him on my podcast.
I think he said this. I think he said that the argument that you see then from the pro-life is that they clearly do differentiate between an abortion and a murder as not the same thing.
There are degrees.
So I'm gonna let her speak, but that was a snippet that was going around that some abolitionist person was sharing to say, Tim exposes how silly it is, the pro-life view. So I thought originally when I saw the clip that it was like something that maybe the conversation was going to be about criminalizing doctors, but he's talking about shooting a doctor. Now, I think there's a couple of different variables in this scenario that don't make it an easy question to answer. What is it legal? Was it legal for him to do the abortion? Whether it's because you can go ahead and shoot the doctor, but if the law is on the doctor's side, you save that life, but you are going to go to jail based on how the law is, because you still murdered that person, but they don't see that. But the law doesn't recognize that unborn child as a person who needed protection, or what the man did was illegal. So you can they mentioned John Brown earlier. Like you can do the let's go shoot people in the face and start a rebellion sort of thing, or you can, chain yourself to abortion clinics and all that stuff and get yourself thrown in jail for a very long time by the Biden administration and never see daylight again. Is that the most that's one way you could do advocacy, but you can you really stop the baby from being killed? Is it the mother at that point maybe going to set up another appointment? Is the best way to ultimately solve the problem to convince hearts and minds to change the legislation, protect the unborn, make people see the error of their ways, become an abolitionist? And I think the abolitionist position is more logically, it's way more logically consistent than the pro-life one, but and go from there. But if if people say, if it's murder, why don't you treat it like murder? As if, why aren't you running it into clinics and saving everybody? I don't think everyone has the attitude of trying to stop a wrong thing if they're going to be the one who's going to end up in jail. Like the Daniel Penny situation on the subway, it was right, I think, that he tried to help all the people on the subway. But after people saw that he was, it resulted in the death of that man, and he's the one who's on trial. There's a lot of people who probably are thinking, I don't know if I'm going to help the stranger if I'm the one who's going to be in jail, rather than, them going after real criminals who are doing harm to people. And even the crazy thing is that there are people who were on the subway who were grateful to him. And there's videos of them trying to put him in the I can't remember the man who name of the man who passed away, but they tried to put him in the recovery position. It seems to me, it seemed like the intent wasn't to kill the man, and intent plays a role in what they charge you with. It doesn't necessarily make you get off scot-free or anything like that. There are other people who helped to subdue the man, but he thought he was protecting the people there, and he may spend, I don't know, the rest of his life in jail, but he's in a bad spot. So I've seen a lot of people react to that and say, don't bother helping people. So I'm not saying this is a right take, but I'm saying Tim's question is a lot more complicated than I think he gives credit for. So would you just go in and shoot abortion doctors who are doing like 9-month abortions are murder at any point in time. And I believe that. But I also don't see in that situation why you would have to still shoot the man. So I do share Kristen's like sentiment. If you think about how abortions are done, like he has a clamp in hand. Well, if it's that late, then it's what, in the middle of the inducing of the fetal demise, and you have the needle. Like about to breach the pregnant woman's belly. Is that the kind of scenario that you're going with? Because if he can do that, I'm imagining it's what, somewhere in like Colorado, or it could be another state, but it's unfortunately not legal to even save that baby, and you will end up in jail. Now he asked the question, like, would you acquit that person? It would depend on, if you value the justice system, it would depend on what he was charged with, the circumstances of the case, and likely, unless he's like a Kermit Gosnell who's doing stuff and didn't have, it wasn't legal to do all the things that he was doing. Like if there was a baby that was born alive and he was about to snip their spine, and you happened to come to see it happening, you'd probably be so shocked. I don't know how fast you'd react, but if you shot that doctor, they probably put you through the ringer too in the justice system. But would you acquit on that? Yeah, I would. Absolutely. But if we were talking about in Colorado where someone was likely to do something like that, the facts of the case, if you're going by the law, would not, based on the instructions that the judge would give you, I don't know that they would lead you to the conclusion that you could acquit them. But if it happened in Oklahoma or something, and you use that self-defense argument, yeah, sure. But you'd have to hear the facts of the case. So I don't think that it's a totally fair question. Which she then brought up a scenario of the abortion clinic and the embryos on fire, and would you save the toddler or would you save all the embryos or whatever? And she talked about how that doesn't prove the value of one's life, and people can decide certain things, and whatever decision that people make, it doesn't make someone not a person. So I think the best way to determine if you really think that it is murder, that if someone if they commit an abortion, that they are committing a murder, would be how you decide to carry out, not just prevent the death, because maybe you can't do that. You can't prevent all death or whatever now, but how would you as a society choose to carry out the punishment? So that's where I thought this conversation might go, because originally I thought that's probably what it was about, and that's why I wanted to see her response. So if you have the opinion that yes, it's murder, so like Joel Berry was on the Abolitionist Rising page, and they were debating it, and Joel's with the Babylon Bee, and he did not want to prosecute women at all, and was using every excuse in the book about it. And he's like, okay, well, if it's so important to you that there's some kind of justice, then how about they pay a fine? And Russell, who's probably the main person you see on that account, was just like, no, because this is like a murder thing. It's not really a small fine thing. And he said not even a large fine. He said a small fine to punish the woman. And it was bizarre that if you watch that interview, I think it will radicalize you. Like, oh my gosh, there's so many holes in the pro-life position. So if you really do think it's murder, then would you treat the person who commits the murder like you would when everyone else commits the murder? because not everybody is even willing to put themselves in harm's way to stop a murder. So I don't think his question really gauges whether or not someone's life is life or whatever. Like Kristen said, she doesn't know she could pull the trigger to kill someone, even to save someone else. She's like, maybe her own children, and maybe it's right to do it for a neighbor, but personally, she doesn't know if she'd be able to do that. So I don't know if we want to depend on her in a crisis kind of situation. But that I don't think that determines whether or not she actually thinks it's murder. But I think there's something to be said about her position that you don't punish anyone except for the abortion doctors. And then there's reasons why pro life people say that, because they don't think the women meet the mens rea. That's what like Ben Shapiro would say, because society has basically brainwashed them. And there are women who don't necessarily know all the things that when they take that pill, what it does. But I don't think that argument works out, and I don't have all the time to explain why. But it doesn't all pan out. We'll have to go through that a different day.
Well, I think it also depends. Like you think about the IVF experiment, right? The IVF thaw experiment that was rampant on.
Okay, so I just explained where she kind of goes from there. So she did have an answer, I guess. I'm not gonna go ahead and play what I just pretty much explained. The conversation I started to play before was Tim Pool talking about abortion in the case of rape, because he thinks that you should be, he's not for elective abortion, which is still, I guess, technically be elective, but he said he's not for using abortion as some kind of birth control. Excuse me. So medical reasons, and he might still say you can do it early. I don't know, but he doesn't think that you should be able to get it willy-nilly or whatever. But he does make the exception for rape, because it sounds like a causal obligation argument. Like if you have sex, even if you mean to be pregnant or not, you did do that, and now that child is into existence. Tough luck, you can't kill them. But if you are raped, you have a child. How can you force a mother to take care of that child? So I think there's ways to combat that. I'm not going to address it because I don't have a lot of time. I'm already over, and I want to, but I'll address it a different day. But I'm going to jump to this pro-choice pastor and what he said at the very end. That was so alarming to me that I just like gasped out loud. So in the midst of this conversation, he starts talking about, he said he doesn't want her to think that he's a baby killer. But he just obviously supports women being able to kill their babies. So he starts telling a story about how his wife miscarried, and it goes on from there.
The subsequent parts also and a subsequent image of God in some way.
In nature of man, and say, look, God,
was it alive?
Sorry.
Spiritual being, and therefore is a Father and a Son and a Holy Spirit. But these are theological opinions.
Well,
they don't
God
have
did
anything to
become
do with
flesh.
abortion.
Well, no.
So we are gonna wrap up. So I don't know if you want to
final
questions.
Why
final
would you
thoughts.
grieve? So like going back to this prayer, this Huffington Post blog you did, you talked about women grieving miscarriage. Why would women grieve human DNA? What's there to grieve if it's nothing?
Because they wanted to have the baby and it didn't make it.
Was it alive?
I have no idea. Here, would you like let me get real.
Well, have you ever seen an ultrasound?
Let me just get real personal with you for a second in the event that you think I'm a baby killer.
Thanks.
I have 2 wonderful children. Mm-hmm. We tried to have 3. Mm-hmm. Between the 2 children, my wife miscarried on our toilet. Mm-hmm. I was out of my mind. I didn't know what to do. The first thing that I did, and I don't even remember reasoning it, it's just where my consciousness went.
Mm.
I went into the kitchen and I got one of those soup spoons,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a bloody mess in the toilet bowl, and I'm trying to find the miscarried pieces. I wasn't attached to a person that existed. I had never known this person. I hadn't had emotional connections with them, conversations, changing their diaper, etc. For me personally, Ryan Phipps, there was not any of that God stuff going on. This is God's image. This is a human who is hurting right now. No one was hurting except for me. And so that I am not able to look at what happened there as this is a human being that is dying in front of me. It had already died inside.
That's what happens in miscarriage.
And so
what were you trying to collect? Because you said miscarriage pieces, which is an inaccurate
because I don't know I wasn't able to find anything.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with miscarriage, depending on what stage the mother was in, how late the pregnancy, but women find
I'm
the
simply
babies,
trying to say
their babies in toilet bowls with chemical abortion.
I think I'm a good dad. You would have to ask my children. I am not interested in killing babies. I am interested in the federal government not telling women what to do with their bodies.
So I just maybe he's a good dad. I don't know if he would equally be a good dad to all of his children if he was willing to allow his wife to abort one. I'm not saying he did or he would, but if he, but just because you are good to some people doesn't make you a good person. He still wants to allow something that is so unethical. There's this movie, Thank You for Smoking. I've never seen it, but when I was in art school at CCS, they were talking about different characters that people make that seem pretty despicable, and the main character was pretty despicable, but they gave him like a quality that still made him like likable, like that was redeemable, and he was a good dad. So you can have some redeeming qualities about you but still support trash things. I'm sure there was plenty of slave owners that were good fathers, and they wanted to make sure that land was taken care of for their heirs. But they obviously supported some pretty terrible human rights violations. So, it doesn't, just because you're good to your kids and you mourned what he thinks is a potential child of his, doesn't erase the fact that he believes that the government should not protect our children from violence if that's what the mother wants to do. But let's keep watching.
Not because of this instance alone, but once the government starts down that road of telling me what I can do with my bodies, I no longer have any hope for the world that my children will grow up in.
Don't you think a million abortions a year sort of necessitates we have this conversation? I met this man last week, and I'm still pretty traumatized from it, Tommy, at Florida International University. He drove 4 hours across the state of Florida. And my bodyguard immediately, hairs were raised because he came barreling towards me. We didn't know this gentleman. Tommy stopped in front of me and began bawling. He pulled out a crumpled picture of an ultrasound out of his pocket. His daughter, who he and his girlfriend had named, her name was Clementine. They were broken up. He had gone away for a week, and his girlfriend was pressured to have an abortion. She had an abortion at 20 weeks. It was a free abortion at Cherry Hill in New Jersey because they told her they would do the abortion for free if she donated her daughter's body to science for research.
And that was her choice.
And Tommy was distraught. Tommy was bawling for hours. And he said, I had no say in this. This was my daughter. I couldn't protect her. I've called the abortion clinic every day trying to retrieve her body because all I want is her body. I'm buying a plot of land. I want to bury her body. This is my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I had no say. My daughter was killed and I had no say. Her mother now regrets it and I have no idea what to do. Do you think there's anything, do you think Tommy should have had any say in whether or not his daughter, who he has the ultrasound of, who is 20 weeks, so like 1.5 weeks away from viability, do you think there was anything wrong with that situation? Or do you think it was just choice?
I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think that's the way that it's supposed to work.
I'll give you my final thoughts.
What's so incredible about that, at that point of the, I was very vocal watching this on my own. And when it got to that point, I like hollered out loud in horror, because if you watched the show with me last week, I showed you a clip of Tommy. I showed you guys a clip of Tommy talking about his child, his daughter. And he said, I just want to find the man who did this. I want to know, was she beautiful? I want to know, was she beautiful? My daughter. He's like, I want to know why people don't think that she's valuable. And he talked about the day that she's supposed to be born and how terrible it is for people to tell him that he is grieving over someone who wasn't really a person. And he maybe I can find it real quick to play it for you guys again, but I was floored. I was floored when he said that, because if you watch this interview, you would know that this man dodged and danced around so many things, so many subjects, so many questions, just wasted so much time. It did not need to be a 2-hour conversation, but he just, and maybe it was supposed to be 2 hours long. I don't know, but he just was so frustrating. So incredibly frustrating to watch. And I could not believe that he just said, I'm not going to beat around the bush with this one, and just flat out said that grieving father, that it's supposed to be this way, that the mother at 20 weeks, even people who say that abortion shouldn't be legal because after the sentience is achieved, will give that leeway to go to 20 weeks because they don't exactly know when sentience starts. And so they feel that's a good cushion time, but that's not too far from viability. And that's when you get into the procedure, not with the pill, but when you have to like actually, it's a multiple day procedure and you have to tear the limbs off. It is a brutal death. It is a brutal death. And we don't know enough about fetal pain. It wasn't that long ago. Literally wasn't that long ago that they would do operations on newborns thinking that they didn't feel pain. So there's a lot about fetal pain we don't know, and it's a good shot the baby can feel pain at that point too, but it is brutal how they tear them to pieces at that point in time. And she didn't even pay for it. They have his daughter's body. How sick is it? How sick is it that this happened? And this man, who calls himself a pastor, said that's the way it's supposed to be. That a father couldn't protect his child. It's just sick, man. I found the video. I don't want to play the whole thing. I just want to play some of it to stir your memory if you haven't seen it. But I'm sure you can find it on Students for Life page. But I just want some of you guys to know this man's anguish. Now, I don't know that this pastor probably doesn't know who she's talking about, but I knew who she was talking about. I knew who she was talking about. And I've seen videos of fathers grieving outside of clinics, screaming, begging women not to kill their babies. I know men who've had nightmares over it, men who've paid for the abortions and deeply regret it. But this is a story.
I just wanted to say my daughter's name is Clementine. She was 5 months along when she was aborted in New Jersey. My daughter was healthy. I begged her mother not to go through with the abortion. For 5 months, we went back and forth. I don't hate my ex. I love her. And I'm working on forgiving her. She was confused. She was uncertain. And she had doubts. Mike Tyson has doubts before he gets into a ring. This was an option, and she took that option, and she regrets it now. Why do you think, and this is just a thought that just came into my head, why do you think that people dehumanize my Clementine? Why wasn't she human enough for people to help me mourn? Why wasn't she human enough for people to talk about? My mother was given birth to prematurely at 5 months. My daughter was 5 months. I didn't get to say goodbye to my daughter. I didn't know about the abortion until after it happened. I begged her not to do the appointment. She told me that she canceled it. My daughter was 5 months and she was ripped apart. My daughter doesn't get a funeral. My daughter doesn't get respect. As my friend asked, yeah, medical testing on a healthy baby. Why? My girlfriend didn't pay for the abortion. The clinic did. How much money did they make off of my daughter's body? How many other babies did the doctor kill since she's been dead? This has been a month and 3 days. This happened March 12th and 13th. My daughter was conceived October 25th. She was supposed to be born July 20th. My daughter was a person. My daughter is an angel. And I pray for her every single day. I talk to her. I still feel like she's there. I feel like on July 20th, my daughter is going to be there. She doesn't get a funeral. I have her sonogram picture the first time I heard her heartbeat. And I bring this up to people and I say, well, she had a heartbeat. Wasn't she a person? And I'm being told she's a fetus, which, by the way, everybody, that's Latin for offspring. Okay? So I don't know why we're speaking Latin. I speak English. And my daughter not only matters, but I do not want my daughter to be forgotten. I want my daughter's story to be talked about. I want her to be remembered. She wasn't just a fetus. And yeah, maybe she was just a 10%, maybe. But she was a lot more than that for me. For 5 months, I'm told by my friends, I'm crying over somebody I never met before. I'm told by people, well, she wasn't even a person. She was just a fetus. She wasn't even a baby. She wasn't fully developed. My daughter was still growing. And my relationship with my daughter was going to grow for the rest of our lives. Why isn't my daughter human enough for people to care? Why isn't my daughter woman enough for her to have a body and for her to have a choice? My original question when I was coming up here was, can I see the clamps? I don't want to see the clamps no more. I've heard enough about it and I've seen the pictures. And yeah, the guy said Wi-Fi and Google search. You could Google what it looks like. It's out there. I did. I wouldn't recommend it. I still have nightmares. My daughter was going to be beautiful, but now I don't know where she is. I'm just so confused. I get it. I'm just a man. You know what I mean? But men, we're not supposed to have feelings. As a father, because I'm still a father. As a father, I'm just supposed to forget. I'm just supposed to move on. And I'm confused. So my question really isn't for you because you understand. My question is really for society. Why doesn't my daughter matter? Why wasn't she enough? Why didn't she get a chance to live? And ultimately, no, I'm not blaming my ex. She had doubt and she regrets it. ultimately, this is our government's fault. We've stopped evil laws in the past in America, in Germany, and you guys know what I'm talking about. We came together and we stopped evil laws. This is an evil law that killed my daughter. Her mother did not kill her. Again, doctors like this man right here, you're not to blame. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for speaking up, because this is important. And not enough men care enough to speak up.
So there's some more, but yeah, that's the man she was talking about, that the pastor just totally disregarded and said that's the way it should be. That's supposed to be. That the mother can kill the father's child. I want women and men to have equal rights. Just like men cannot murder their children, I don't think women should be able to do that. So his story is terrifying and horrifying, and my heart grieves for him. And I want people to remember Clementine. But the pastor, he said, "I'm a good dad." You're not a man. I biologically, sure. Morally, I don't think so. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm sorry if it's a little vulgar, but if you don't believe in protecting your children, your kids, you don't deserve the balls between your legs. Seriously. Seriously. But if he killed his child, if he slipped that woman an abortion pill, they'd want that man to go to jail. They'd want him to go to jail. If he grieves over his daughter, they say get over it. Anyway, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on the website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website. It does cost to stream and run my website, all that stuff, so you guys can support. I appreciate it and appreciate you guys. I did want to talk about Tim's opinion on abortion in the cape of sexual assault, but I just didn't want this to go for too long, and we're already like heading over in the 2-hour section. I did not mean to even talk this long, but anyway, thank you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.